Well, welcome everyone. I'm very much looking forward to speaking with you tonight. And at the end, we will have time, as was said earlier, for your questions, if you have any. And please, if you like, I can't see them during the presentation, but after the presentation, we are welcome to answer any questions you may have. Before I start, I like to always tell you I'm talking to you from Davis, California, which is the land of the Patwin people. And I believe as a genealogist, it is very important for us to acknowledge the indigenous people of these lands that have remained committed to its stewardship over many centuries. I'm honored and grateful to be residing here and speaking on their traditional unceded lands. A lot of times as genealogists, we look into the stories of our own families and what brought us to reside in the United States. And we look at immigration records or military records, land grants, all these different things. But it is extremely important to us to remember the context in which we entered, or our ancestors possibly entered the United States, which was the land of the indigenous people. So I would really like all of us to always remember that when we're doing our genealogy research. So today I'm going to talk about varying things. The first is who are Arab Americans? What are we talking about when we're doing Arab genealogy research? Who are the Arabs, or which countries are considered Arab? Because there are different definitions that we want to look at. There's also a historical context to look at. How do you even get started in this research? What are some traditional US records and how do we apply Arab American genealogy research to that? And then some tips on how to do this research. And then where do you find the documents? Where do you find all of this information? And then, of course, a lot of people's favorite is DNA, right? Everyone's taking their DNA tests and how to use that with Arab American research. So let's start with definitions. In the context of this presentation and with the research that if you're doing research on Arab Americans, we're going to be talking about individuals residing in the United States from or descendants of people from Arab identified countries. And I'll talk to you in a minute about, you don't necessarily have to consider yourself Arab to use these techniques. There may be other ethnicities or other people who are living in the same countries. You can use similar techniques for that research. Other people look at the term MENA as the region, so Middle East, North African region. This is a term, it's very Eurocentric, so Middle East, when we're looking from Europe. We're moving toward, a lot of people are moving toward a SWANA terminology. SWANA is Southwest Asia, North Africa. So when you're looking at different archives or university information or things, it will give you, you can use any of those three terms maybe used for the same region. Okay, what countries are considered countries that are Arab? So we're looking at mostly identified as countries from the Arab League. And so those are the countries right there that are considered. Again, it's not necessarily everyone in those countries identify as Arab, but we're going to be using this terms for the research purposes. Other racial ethnic identities that can be considered found in these countries. There's people who are African, Armenian, Assyrian, pretty much, Kurdish, Turkish. There's so many different identifications that people have used that live in the region. And there's also a lot of different religious identities. A lot of people just assume that the Arab world is just straight Muslim. They don't even know the different types of Islam or different types of, or Christianity. I have people said, oh, there's Christians coming. I'm like, this is where Jesus, the Middle East is where Jesus came from. And some people take a minute to connect what we're talking about. So I think people have to realize when they look at, there's many people practicing many religions and different ethnic or racial identities in the area. So again, when we're looking at definitions, we want to look at people residing in the United States. If we're looking at Arab American research, who are descendants of either themselves immigrants or descendants of people who come from one of these countries. There's a lot of issues related to that hinder research. So first of all, again, people are self-identifying what they consider themselves, whether they're Arab or not, or even, we'll talk in a bit, what countries or how they are defined at certain parts in history. And then there's other things like there's no clear Arab or MENA, SWANA ID in US records, or even like, for example, the US Census. That is hopefully changing. There is recent laws changed, at least for now, that these things will be changing state by state or hopefully on a federal level. So we'll see in the future, but historically, and as we're doing this research, there are no specific ID for this in US records. And then US records, again, change identity categories on how they are considered, what Arabs fall under, whether it's other, whether it's white, whether it's, you know, some people mark Asian, people mark African. So it's not a consistent identification in records. We have language barriers. So there's a lot of old records that are not even, so we talk about English and Arabic, but there's because of colonialism, we have French, we have Spanish, we have a lot of different languages. Then we also have Ottoman Turkish records. So there's, which is not even a language that is used anymore, except for Turkish, but they're used in Arabic lettering. So we are now, again, that's a whole other barrier that we're dealing with. The issue of when you translate things, spelling variations are not common. There are so many variations that can be for one name. And if we look, you know, further back, the people, enslaved North Africans, were never documented, or there's very limited research on those who may identify or may not identify as Arab, but may be coming from countries that are currently identified as Arab. Okay, with any research in the MENA region, whether it's genealogy or anything else, we have to look at varying periods of time. We mostly focus on three. The first, obviously, is the Ottoman Empire control for an extremely long time with most of the region. So that is something that has to be considered. Then you have the European colonial time, you know, post-World War I time period. And then, of course, post-World War II, there is more modern borders. You know, a lot of them are colonial borders, but again, there were more modern borders. Some countries were able to have independence. And then, of course, so record keeping and other things changed. So all of these things we have to consider when we're doing research, because as you probably know, when you do genealogy research, you have to look at the historical context of that research, whether it's for records or whether it's just for your family stories, because a lot of the history ties into the family stories, whether it's a war, whether it's, you know, just how migration works. All of these things are connected to history. So when we do that and we look at it as it ties to our genealogy, we have to look at these things in the same context. Okay, now we're jumping into genealogy. So before we get to the records, before I talk to you about where to find them, we have to talk about what you can do to start. So the first thing you want to do is to see what you have. What does your family members have? What do you, if you look around your house, do you have photos? Do you have birth certificates? Do you have any of these things that could help you with your research? Once you gather what you and your family that's around you have, the next thing to do is to interview your family members. This is critical. I mean, like the stories, even if, okay, some people tell me I don't want to interview them because, you know, my grandfather, his memory isn't so great. It's like, it doesn't matter you're not interviewing them necessarily for the truth. You're interviewing them for their perception at the time that you're interviewing them, and you're interviewing them for the stories, at least to what their memory is at the time. Obviously, it's better if you interview people as they are younger and they have still connections to the memory of what happened, the closer connection times period. But it doesn't matter. I mean, don't not interview somebody because you think that their memory is not the best, because, you know, you may lose that time to interview somebody. And when I do a whole presentation on how to do the interviews, but the main thing is to start with the oldest and move down and get as many people that you can interview, ask them as many questions as you can, and then write everything down, whether you use a computer program, whether you write it down with old school and notebooks, whatever you do, you need to have it all written down. Names, places, dates, the stories. Don't forget the stories. Some people just put name and a date, and that's not enough. You put everything that you can get from anywhere, and then write where you got it from. Because I can tell you, I wish I did that 20 years ago when I was doing research, because sometimes I'm like, where did I get this information? And I have to go back and prove it, and I don't remember where I got it from. So write down where the information came from. Okay, so photos. We're going to start with photos. These are 3 photos of different Arab ancestors of US citizens. So they can look very different. the typical, what they assume, people assume is an Arab ancestor is not necessarily what is the reality of it. And there are now, there's a book out called the Arab Imago that is, that talks about Ottoman photographers or Ottoman photo studios, that I'm actually trying to get into this book. I'm hoping it'll help, because sometimes on those photos, you'll have little notes of the photo studio. So that might actually give you more information of where those ancestors are from and, you know, the time period. But that's a whole other thing that we can get into. But just really look at all the pictures and see if you can get people to identify who are in those pictures. Okay. US sources. So let's say you've done all the pre-work, right? And so you say, okay, I want to see what in the United States. I lived in the United States, either yourself immigrated, again, it could be your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents. It doesn't really matter. You already have, you start with what is here, what is in the United States. So regular documentation that we use for US records are state census records, federal census records, vital records, which are like birth, marriage, death records, immigration records, newspapers, court, land records. Any of these things that we talk about in genealogy research still apply in Arab American research. So let me give you an example. Here was a newspaper article. Young Syrian widow whose husband died with the Titanic writes to Madeline Astor. So this is a story. This, you go further down, you talk about the Syrian, which could be anywhere in the Levant area, Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, of Syrian immigrants that were passengers on the Titanic, and 30 survived. And so maybe, you know, maybe that's something that's related to your family and you didn't realize that there's a lot of newspaper articles out there about it. Again, we can get from the newspaper historic information, because if you look further, it says pretty Asian girl about to become mother. And it goes on actually in the story to talk about her skin color and her hair and all these things. So we see the Orientalism, or the, you know, the description of these Middle Eastern women in the newspaper. But again, you don't want to avoid things because it's of the time. You understand what the way people historically were described or dealt with in the paper or in the media at that time. So it's actually very interesting if you're looking not just for your family history research, but just to get an idea of the tone and the experiences that your family may have gone through. And so some people think, okay, I'm an immigrant, or my parents are immigrants, there's going to be nothing in the paper for me. This is an example of two articles that my own father, who immigrated to the United States in the 1950s, he owned a gas station, and going through the local newspapers on, I was able to find newspaper articles where he was included in. One was a social engagement and one was about the price of oil. He was interviewed when he was in the gas station. So don't think that just because you or your parents immigrated here that you would never find anything in the newspaper. There's a lot of things that you find in newspapers. And even if it goes back further, parents, grandparents, newspapers, especially smaller town newspapers, are like today's Facebook. There's so much information in there. And you can find them, if you go on my handout, there's a resource to places to look for things like newspapers, but newspapers.com, newspapersarchives.com, California digital newspapers. There's so many different places where you can get newspaper, you have access to newspapers. Some are paid, some are not. So you may want to look into those when you're looking into newspapers. And some local newspapers, always the library. We forget that today, but our library does have, you know, most of the libraries do have either microfilm or digital copies of local newspapers, and you can go there and, you know, around the time you can look through either digital copies if it's not indexed, or you know, or flip through the pages. I mean, newspapers are really a great source for information. So I'm going to go through now with you kind of different record sets, but giving you through it is an example of one person, how the identification of one person's birthplace has changed over time in the way it was dealt with. So here we have a woman, Helen Nassif, and all the references and citations to these documents that I'm sharing today are in the handout, but I want to go through them step by step so you understand why, you know, what are the things that we have to overcome when we're dealing with Arab American research, and then also tips to kind of get around those. So here is a 1910 census. She is listed coming from, it's in Cedar Rapids, and she is listed as it's TUR.AS Syrian. That is her place of origin, place of birth. So if you look at that, so that's 1910 census. Let me explain to you why that is. Okay, because the enumeration instructions for the 1910 census had people who were born in Turkey, which was the Ottoman Empire at the time. So they didn't call it that, they called it Turkey. Distinguish between Turkey and Europe and Turkey and Asia. So her distinction is saying that she is part of Turkey and Asia, which is the Arab world. Mostly, there's other parts, but that's what they're looking at. So when they put it down like that, it's a distinction. But the problem is, well, besides just, you know, there wasn't a country listed. The other problem is, if you look at the index, we have these are two of the main popular, you know, searches. We go to ancestry.com or familysearch.org. That document, that census, is then indexed as her place of birth is Turkey. It's not Syria, it's not Lebanon, it's not even the Ottoman Empire. It's listed as her place of birth as Turkey. So if you were searching for Lebanon or searching for Syria for this person, because you know that's where your grandmother, great-grandmother came from, you wouldn't find it from that search. You would have to adjust. So again, there's times, depending on the dates, that's again why I said, you want to look at the historic background in your search so that you know when you're looking it up that, oh, maybe it won't be listed under these countries. Maybe I need to find a different country in my search the way I'm looking. So this is just something to keep in mind while you're doing the research. This is, again, the same person. She is in 1925 Iowa State Census. Her place of birth is listed as Arabia. Again, as we know, there's not, I mean, except for Saudi Arabia, there isn't an Arabia, but her country of birth, presumably, is considered Arabia in this 1925 Iowa State Census. Now we're moving forward. 1926, she got married. Her place of birth is, or her race actually her place of birth and her race was Syria, and her place of birth is Ain Arab, Syria. And so that's where she has it listed. And that's, again, 1925. This is after they moved beyond, you know, historically, again, looking at the different changes in history or where countries are identified. And finally, here's her 1992 obituary, where she is stated that she was born in Lebanon. So the same person throughout the US records are having 4 different identities of where she's from. So with your research, you really need to be open to be creative in how you search for things and look at the historical content. So I'm going to give you a few tips here for immigration records. So a lot of people look for citizenship certificates or naturalization documents. Well, first of all, there's multiple naturalization documents. And second of all, that shouldn't be the only place, or even just a lot of times we look at passenger lists. But there's a lot of times people from Arab countries would go back to their homelands and come back. So for example, you may find a later date or a later passenger list that wasn't their first entry. They may have come, you know, 2-3 times coming through. So you need to actually look. Again, don't assume that it's 2 different people that you found at 2 different times, or don't assume that it was their first time entering. You need to do a little more research into when family members came back and forth. Also, a lot of people came up from Central and South America through Mexico into the United States. So border crossings are another important immigration record to look at. You want to look, again, obviously, at naturalization records, but also remember, naturalization records aren't just online. You might find them online. You might find them in a court basement somewhere, or you may find it through USCIS files requesting a FOIA. There's so many places naturalization records are, and it's not just the record you want, it's also intent to naturalize and other things like that. So consider all of those. The other thing is to look at consular records. So consular records could also have, whether it's birth abroad, whether it's you know, noting where people are. I'm going to give you a few examples. This is a naturalization record for Ilyas Carlos Said, you see this is a declaration of intention. This is not the naturalization application itself. This is the pre-application. So you get so much information. This is actually gives you a lot more information. It gives you his place of birth. It gives you where he came in. It gives you where he was from, which is the Ottoman Empire, or who was the governing control. It gives you a lot of information. If he was married or had children, all of this stuff come through on other naturalization documentation that is not necessarily the final application or the certificate of naturalization. So look at those more developed immigration records, again, broader than our naturalization only. This example is a certificate of registration for an American citizen. It is someone who was then abroad, who's American, a US citizen, but then is abroad for some reason and registered with the embassy. So here we have Ibrahim Shashu. He is born in Baghdad. It says Arabia. We know that's today as Iraq. Where he lived, you see where he lived in, well, not specifically in the United States, that he was a US citizen, so he must have naturalized in the United States. When he arrived in England, what years, why, what he was doing, whether he was married or had children. So there was just a lot of information, again, that you may find information about your ancestors in that are not standard immigration records that we look for. Here we have the passenger list, arrival, inbound passenger or arrival records. Again, it shows these records are extremely important, not only on the names and dates of birth, but they also go on to tell you who they are going to see, whether it's a friend, whether it's a family member. A lot of times it'll say whether or not they are US citizens, whether this is their first entry or not. The birth report of birth abroad of a American to American parents. It gives you information about the parents and the child and where they've lived. These documents are filled with information for research on our ancestors. So again, they can be from, last month, or they can be from 150 years ago, but we have to look at these things. Obviously, if they're current, there's a lot of privacy issues that we all should be concerned about, but otherwise they have there's a lot of things that we can access and get information about our ancestors. So another thing I mentioned earlier is Arabic names they aren't standard in the way they are in English. So first of all, I hope most Arab documents or documents from an Arab country have 4 names rather than 3 on them. So they'll have the person's given name, their father's name, their grandfather's name, and then the family name. So many times I've seen it in, whether through my immigration work or as an attorney or through genealogy, is where the grandfather's name will be actually the name put on documents. So people in the US 2 generations later might think that is their family name. It actually turned out it's the grandfather of the person who immigrated rather than the broader family name to research. That's something to keep in mind when you're looking at documents and you're like, I cannot find this family, or the family's name is Muhammad, or the family's name is Ilyas, and you're like, okay, this is the most common name. I'm never going to find this last name. And it turns out it's not the last name at all. You have to do a lot more research to find out what actually family name it came from. So a lot of times you can figure out relationships through names. So for example, a father's name a lot of times is used as the middle name for all the members, whether they're male or female in a family. The eldest son is a lot of times, again, these are things to use as clues. It's not every time that these are going to happen, but they're clues for you to look on relationships. The eldest son is a lot of times named after a grandfather. Well, I'm going to talk about spelling variations in a minute, but there's also things like dashes or spaces. You're using AL or EL before a name. You might have that A or L or EL, which is the dropped. So like if it's El Rashid and then the last name becomes Rashid, or or sometimes there's a hyphen and that hyphen is combined and it's all flowed together. These type of things, again, we have to look at. Also meanings of names. So for example, I've seen personally when I'm working with a family on their research, is they believed their last name is Khoury. Khoury means priest. So maybe the person who immigrated was Khoury, was a priest. And then people called him, something Khoury. as a sign of respect. And then that became his last name. There is a last name Khoury. There is people from from that family, but sometimes it's also just that he was a priest and they use that name. So you really, again, the research is important because you don't want to assume things that that the information gets lost after a generation or two. The other thing is names could have come rather than from a family, specifically it could be a nickname, it could come from a profession or a place that they travel to, or from a town. Also, you see a lot of bin someone, son of someone, Abu someone. So sometimes it becomes like Abu Khalid is a example of a name of someone. His name is Omar, but his son is Khalid, and they call him Abu Khalid. So people might write him a letter, dear Abu Khalid. So his name is not Abu Khalid, his name is Omar. But so there's things that you have to look at these things to see if is that part of their name, or is that actually just a reference to them in a relationship. So again, these type of things get us confused, but it also can help us find hints to relationships and things like that. So hopefully that will help you like look at what you're researching and find out if it's even what you thought you were researching. Okay, so don't forget, like I said earlier, to do creative research. So things like, so the naturalization record I showed you earlier for Ilyas Saya, when I researched it, it was, when I was searching for it, it came out, it was indexed SAYCH. So again, hopefully if you know how to do wildcard searches, then that's using the asterisks. So when I'm doing those, sometimes I'll just use the first 3 letters of a word or a name, and then I'll put an asterisk because then I'll catch everything after that, versus very specifically searching for a name in a specific spelling. Because like I said earlier, we have, I'll give you an example on this slide, just the name Muhammad. Muhammad can be spelled with 2 M's, 2 E's, 2 A's, or shortened to be Mo. And I've seen it a lot of as MOH. And I know people who use Mike, or like I said, Latif, the I, the long E, the Y's and the E's and the I's, all of these things can be changed from Arabic to English. So it's something that you want to look at. Also, place spellings, same exact thing. Things are spelled differently in different ways. So you need to be creative and try different spellings, try different search tricks, these type of things to try and get it to go forward. Okay, if you're familiar with genealogy research, you're probably familiar with the fan or cluster research method, and that is to research people around them, like people who people traveled with, people who you live near, people work with. It's very common for people to immigrate with people from their town, or even family members, even if they all have different last names. They could be brothers and have different last names on their papers. So look at the people on the on the passenger list. Look at the people who live nearby, that are born in the same country. Look at all those people, because a lot of times you'll see them traveling or listed in different places still together. So that kind of research it's for fan research, for friends, associates, and neighbors. So it's something that we can use a lot with Arab American research. This is an example of a different named person. There is this man who's referred to a lot in the US history as High Jolly. He's actually gone by several different names. One is Hajj Ali, one is Ali Hajaya, one was Philip Tudrow. So it is unknown. I have read 3 different documentations about him where he was Greek, he was Lebanese, he was from Yemen, he was from, it's just, I don't know exactly what the final determination was where he was from, but he was hired to bring camels into the United States on an experience with the US Army when they were trying to see if camels would work here as a way for some military transportation. And so again, Hajj Ali became High Jolly. So you really, we have to be creative in the way we're looking into things. And again, here we have 3 different documentations, a picture and 2 newspaper articles. And the newspapers were from, one was from Minnesota, one was from Missouri, and another one was from a Texas library where I obtained these documents. So, even if they're from one place, you may have information all over the place where you can find them. So we're going to talk about that right now. What resources, where can you find, I'm showing you documentation, but where do you find these documents? Where do you see that you can move forward with them? Okay, so books are a big thing. Books, you see in the top corner here, pictures of many books. These are from my own library behind me. There's a lot of wonderful researchers who have done a lot of write-ups of varying places in the United States or abroad. So one of these books is from the Ramallah Federation, cells from a town called Ramallah, and they have genealogy history. Other ones are more about the American community where Americans live, and some are actual genealogy or family histories. I've also found with my travel, I have found books on different towns or villages that talk about that town or village in, they're Palestinian towns or Lebanese or Syrian or whatever. So you have all these options. The picture in the middle is Ansab Sharaf, sorry. And that's more of a tribal, like where we look at the Arab tribes and where things come from. So if you think you descend from a written up Arab tribe, there may be information for you. This is just an example of books. I have found books like this on online. On Internet Archive has books of these that you can download versus buying them. There's a lot of things. Unfortunately, obviously they're in Arabic, but hopefully, working with genealogists with those skills that you can pull out information. And then you have I loved this one, Dr. Abdu's Travel in America, and it's an old like directory from, I believe, the early 1900s, and this one was found, I had from the New York Public Library, but they I believe have a copy of it at the Arab American Museum. So that's a place I'll talk about in a second. But books, again, books, you don't count out books. I know we always look for the internet, but do not count out books. Okay, I'm going to talk about a couple of archives in the United States that I use a lot, and I think a lot of people can find information about. First is the Arab American National Museum in Dearborn. They have a great online digital collection. They also have collections at their facility, at their museum. You can always call them. They're extremely helpful, and they're actually doing an oral history project, I believe, right now for people who want to share their Arab American story or their immigrant story, or anything about that. They are looking for people who want to share. It would be interesting being interviewed. So if you're interested, I would call them or contact them, and I'll show you a little bit more about them in a minute. Khayarullah Center Archive, which is North Carolina State University. They have a lot of information. They just updated their Facebook or their website, and they actually made it so easy for people to find information. Family Search, which is a broader genealogy research website or through familysearch.org. They are working really hard to expand their Middle East, North Africa section. They have a Facebook group, and they have also they're adding a lot of documentation. Every day I'm finding something new through them. So I'm going to tell you a little more detail. This is Arab American Museum. You can see right here, I'm going through the archives that they have. They have oral histories and varying things. Again, you just go in and go through. You can either search or flip through as I did here. It is the only Arab American museum here in the United States, and it has a lot of information. There's a lot of people. I know of people. I'm here in California. I know people who willed or passed on all of their history and documentation to the museum to save that for other people who are researching or just people who are interested. So it's a great place to look at. Khayarullah Center, as I said, they just redid their website. It's great. They have the archives very clearly shown where you can search or again flip through it. They have Arabic newspapers, Arab American newspapers, including newspapers from North and South America, from, I believe, the 1800s on. And so again, that's a place where you could find information. They have projects that they're working on. If there's something that you are working on, if you have a family book or something that you're doing and you want to have it scanned and saved for other people who may be researching that family, that's a great place to reach out to, where either to find your stuff or to share things that you may have. And then again, Family Search, they have the generalfamilysearch.org. It's a free site. You just have to make a website, and then you can keep on going with that. It has the Facebook group. It has, I'm going to talk about Ottoman records that I get through them. I've found church records. I found, so many different things for them. So familysearch.org is a great place to go. Additional things, again, university libraries are your friends. Special collections, they have a lot of information there. Oral history collections throughout. If you're researching, you don't need to only look for people from your family. I like to look for people who are interviewed from the time and place that your family lived, because your family may have never been interviewed, but maybe you find someone from the same town or from the same country or from the same time period that you're researching and you're finding your family. And so that listening to the stories of the people who have been interviewed are just as important. Unfortunately, maybe you don't have it for yourself, but you can just get an idea of where your ancestors lived. Online newspapers, like I said, local community centers. There is, as I said before, the Ramallah Federation has a book and they have a website. The Arab American Heritage Council in Flint, Michigan has an amazing book about people who came there. There's a lot of different ones. Facebook groups. There's a wonderful Lebanese or ancestors, people who have descendants from Lebanon, Facebook group. There's different religious or ethnic or cultural organizations. There's a lot out there. You just have to know to look and where to look. So I hope you will do that. And a lot of times you're able to ask questions at least and have people can respond to see if you're on the right track. Auburn Records, we don't have access to too many, but we're starting to have more. So it is a great, it's an amazing source, because obviously, as you know, all the pre-1910 records are Ottoman records at this point. And so there's census records, land records, population records, identification, tax records. Some of the issues are a lot of pre-1890 lists male members. But I'll have to tell you, the ones later really have helped so many people find female members, because a lot of times you'll find trees without female members. This is an example. These are headers for, I believe it's the 1905 or 1917 census, and it lists most of the time. They don't fill out everything on there. And if you can't read this, I don't know if you can read it on your screen, but if you can't read it on your screen, there's a link to a blog that I have done, and I have it on there. You can blow up the picture on my website. So that'll give you more of a information. But the great thing is, even from my own research, I am finding now, I finally figured out who is, I believe it's a second great grandmother, because I knew the grandfather's name, but I didn't know his wife's name. And now it was listed in the Ottoman census, and hopefully that will become more of a documentation. There is the Family Search has with for Palestine. They're working on Lebanon, and I know there's work between varying centers in the United States that are working with, whether it's in Turkey or whether it's in the specific countries themselves, to getting pulled out those records and trying to get them available for not just us, but other people who are doing research, whether it's genealogy or history or things like that. Okay, so there's also international archives. So we're looking at things like the Arab Collection Online, which is a program through NYU Abu Dhabi, but also through American University of Beirut works on that. Qatar, different countries have all put documentation or books related in Arabic on this site. It's a great resource. Many libraries, Egypt, Alexandria, Abu Dhabi, a lot of these different libraries have digital collections. On my resource page, which is on the handout, there's a link to those, to some of them that I've started gathering and put on there. And then American University of Beirut Library. I was able to find so many things there that was really helpful for things I'm going to show you right here. If you look and you go down, you're going to go down here and see these are yearbooks from 1946 on. I believe it goes only to 2017, and you can flip through them. They are in English, so they're easier to access for those reading English, obviously, with stories, with information. And then they do have, at the end, you'll see in a second, I believe, yeah, pictures from, here we go, you know, the graduating classes, and you'll see those. So there's so much information in there. If you know that you have an ancestor or relative who went to the American University of Beirut. And again, it's not just from people from Lebanon, people from all over the region attended. And there are also information about people, obviously, if someone worked there who is not an Arab, who is interested in, you know, where their ancestor worked, there's access to these things here. Okay, DNA. DNA is always a favorite. I am always so excited to be able to talk to people about DNA testing and what they can find there. But again, I always tell people you have to be prepared when you take a DNA test. You can always find things that you're not necessarily aware of. You know, there's always either family secrets or things that happen to family members that they did not share with everyone else. So sometimes the DNA, you know, brings things through, whether it's autosomal DNA, places like Ancestry or 23andMe. You also have Y-DNA or mitochondrial DNA on family tree DNA, which family tree DNA actually has group projects, and there are at least 18 of them related to Arab DNA. Some of them are country specific, like people from everybody, you know, sign up for, if you have your DNA tested, then you can sign up for the group from Lebanon or from Yemen or from wherever. There's other ones that are very name specific. And so that's another thing. I mean, there's a lot of European names, but there are also Arab names. Like I said, there's at least 18 groups on there of people who had their DNA tested, and then they joined a group to see, you know, if they can connect to other family members through this DNA test. So that's something to look at. There's DNA research is moving very fast. The sites such as Ancestry or again 23andMe or any of the other ones, they really they're giving us a lot of connections to people who are trying to figure out, because a lot of people have told me they don't know exactly where they're from in a certain country, and then they can connect with people who are still living in that country, and they can then find out, you know, what town they came from or things like that. So it's really helpful. But you also have to, again, remember that there are things that could come out that you don't want to know. Okay, so I'm going to go through these practical steps with you again. So, so again, begin with what you know. So begin with what's around you, the people around you, interview and ask questions, research online databases. So again, I provided you with some now. And again, even if you are the immigrant, there are a lot of, like I said, databases online now that are Arab databases that are coming from all these countries that you can help research and get information and documentation of your family. I used to think that the only documentation I would have from my Arab side of my family would be oral history. So I started young, you know, writing down interviews with people or videotaping or pictures or all these things. And more recently, I've found Ottoman documents, I've found tax documents, I have documents from, you know, all these different people who came through the areas. And so it's depending, whatever government, you know, came through, there is a record. Even if some were destroyed, not all of them were, and people did keep them. So you would never realize that. So, and databases, they're everywhere is setting up digital archives. It's going to become more and more prevalent that you're going to be able to find things online, but not everything is online. So you research online and then you research in person. If we're living here in the United States, we're going to start with researching in the United States to see where our family, you know, lived here. DNA tests can be taken anywhere in that process. Some people start with DNA and some people don't touch the DNA until you get further along. And other people don't want to have their DNA tested, but I think it's a very helpful tool for this research. And if you have the privilege, you can either, whether you go, you know, back home, if that's where you are, if that's where your family is from and that you have that relationship and you're going to visit your family, you could research abroad. Or, I've known of many people who've taken research trips where they have found things when we've gone. The best thing when you're doing that, if you don't have those connections, is to prepare everything ahead of time, is to do all the research from now. That's why I put this last, because you have to start from, where you are and then go backwards. So you start with yourself and you go backwards. I'll even tell you something I recommend to people is to, we have Zoom. We're doing this presentation on Zoom. You can set up, the Zoom. You're in a meeting by yourself, record your story for your children, your grandchildren. Don't, or even if you don't have children and grandchildren, record your story for a relative that may be interested in what you remember about your family, because all of this is important. And we have the technology today, and we can really use it and know. I want to tell you about something great. We have just founded a new organization 2 months ago called the National Society for Arab and Arab American Genealogy. It is a new organization. We're getting all the kinks out of the technical parts of it. So you would have to right now follow us on a social media platform. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. You can follow us there. And then hopefully within the next month, we will have a way for email lists and membership and all of that. We're going to be having lectures and resources and things like that going on. And we're hopefully going to have a page where people can collaborate. It will be behind a kind of a paywall kind of thing where you can log in for privacy. So hopefully we will have all those things up in the next couple of months. But go ahead and follow for updates on one of the social media sites, so you will see that. This is something, it's ArabAmericanGenealogy.com. So it's for Arab American genealogy, but also Arab genealogy. So for example, you have family abroad who are doing genealogy research. We're hoping everybody gathers and we can really, collaborate with each other on this research, because it's great language. People can help each other with language issues and other things like that. So I hope you will join that. It's an organization that is getting kicked off. For myself, if you have any questions, I have a genealogy business where I do research and do presentations as such as this one. This has my email. My website is photosmemoriesbyreem.com. I have a blog that shares information and advice on not just Arab American genealogy, as was said earlier. I do a lot of oral history and other types of research. So it's great if you have questions, you can read the blog, or go ahead and give me an email, send me an email. I do try and help out, or if I don't get to your question today, I do try to respond to emails from people who attend my presentation. So I hope you'll do that, and also on social media. So we're going to get to the questions. I think Kurt is I'm going to stop. Do you want me to stop sharing my screen? Is that the best way of doing this?
That probably is, yes.
Okay, are we good there?
Yes, we are. Yes, we are.
Okay, great. So
we do have a couple of questions,
okay.
But thank you so much for this presentation. I took a whole page of notes right here, so really, really awesome. I so much appreciate how you emphasized, sound research, no matter where your research is taking you, those sound strategies. How awesome to know about the Arab American National Museum website. They are using the same content management system, which is Content DM, that many libraries and universities use all over the country, literally all over the world. So people should be familiar with how to navigate that. So that's really, really awesome, but really great information. And how exciting about the National Society for Arab and Arab American Genealogy, that it's time for an organization like that. So thank you for putting the time and the effort into that. We do have a couple questions, but I would like to ask you one myself first.
Go for it.
You mentioned early on the Ottoman photo studios. Did I hear that right?
Oh no, there's a here. Actually, let me see if I have a couple of books next to me because I was reviewing it before. Here we go. This book, it's and if you can see, is it clear?
Yes.
Okay, so it's about the intention of it, I don't think, was to give us information directly about, it's more of a social history book on different things, but it does discuss portrait photography in the Ottoman, it's from, let's see, from what is this, 1850 to 1910. So it talks about portrait photography in the Ottoman Empire, and which I found the book fascinating in the sense that you know, you always see the little names at the bottom of pictures, but you don't think, oh, how is that going to help you date the picture to figure out who they are? Sometimes, I mean, hopefully you know who they are, or there's writing on the back. I mean, a lot of times within the Arab world, people would, I mean, and actually here in the United States, people would have those photos taken and they became postcards, and they would mail them as postcards, right? And that happened also during that time, also through the Ottoman time in the later 1900s in the US, in the Arab world. So you would get postcards, but it would be written or stamped at the bottom where the name of the studio, but not necessarily the place. So I'm trying to find resources to find, I'm sure you're familiar with, you know, the photo research. The way we do in general genealogy is we're looking through photo analysis and, you know, what is the type of material, what is the background, what is the clothing, all of these things that kind of date the photo. And so this one, I was trying to find something that how do I date Arab American photos? How do I date photos from the Arab world? And this book does have some information. Again, it's more on social history, but of this type of photography, but it really provided information that I was surprised was out there. So I was really excited to find it.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. Thank you so much for clarifying that and for sharing that. The first question we have in the Q&A this evening, Reem, asks, how do you pronounce ELIAS, and are there spelling variants to that?
So ELIAS is Elias. So there are, people spell it with a Y sometimes, ELYAS. Also, there is a use of Elia, which is the Greek ELIA. And so, and then I've seen people write it, especially in the United States, as ELI, like Eli, where as a shortened version, it becomes the name. But you asked the question, it's actually my husband's name is Elias. So I have to, I better get this all right, because I don't know if he's watching this, but if I get it wrong, I'm in big trouble. So it's very, a lot of people say Elias, and there, you know, also there's Spanish and other versions of it, but in Arabic it's Elias.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that. The other question we have is from Ricky, and she asks, where do you find the council birth records?
Oh, the consular birth records. So there's a lot of consular or immigration documents. I believe that one was on ancestry.com. But Family Search has them. You also can, there's been some research, I believe the Khairallah Center has digitized some from Beirut. I don't know if it's the actual birth records. I'm actually working through them right now on a project that I'm doing, but I believe there's passport applications and some other ones that may be available on that. Unfortunately, the National Archives, these came from the National Archives, but the National Archives hasn't digitized them. But I know the Khairallah Center that I mentioned earlier, they have kind of made a deal with them, and they did get some of them scanned. And so they're actually available from your home on your website, on your computer. You can go straight to their website and open them. And you'll have some of, obviously not everything, but there are some from, at least from the US Embassy in Beirut, some of the old records. And so that's someplace that, you know, if that's where you're looking, can start. But they do have them. And some of those records, some State Department records, because embassies are through the Department of State versus, like, it's not through immigration necessarily, because you can apply FOIAs through USCIS or the genealogy section of requests through USCIS, but you can also do FOIAs through the Department of State. I mean, most people don't do that.
It's a great point.
Yeah, you can do that, and you can request documentation if they have it, if it hasn't already been moved to National Archives. So the one thing I want you guys to remember is something when I was a naive beginning genealogist a few years ago, we won't mention how long, I thought National Archives is Washington, D.C., right? But the National Archives actually have branches all over the United States. And so you have to kind of go online and look where the document you want is located, and then approach that archive, not necessarily thinking, oh, I'm in DC on a vacation, let me go there. And they're like, it's in California. You live in California, 50 minutes from where you were, looking. So again, you want to, if you're doing a trip where you're doing research and you want to do research while you're doing that, preparing for the trip is very important, because sometimes things are not where we think they should be, or logically they would be. They're somewhere else. But you can also, the other thing is to contact them. I mean, sometimes you can contact locations or archives. I've done that with archives abroad, where I've just shot an email, or, if I didn't get it, I tried to call, used WhatsApp. And now you can do so many things where you can call, people or things, or a lot of times offices will have a WhatsApp number. It's kind of interesting. And you can call them, and then a lot of times people will speak English, and you can ask them, and people really go out of their way to help you. I have to say, I found when people are hesitant at first, but when you explain what you're doing and why you want to do it, a lot of times people will go out of their way, whether it's a city record, it's a federal, a record in another country, whether it's an archive. Librarians are my favorite people. Because they always seem to go out of their way. But churches, any places, like, you can call, and a lot of times people will go if they can. Obviously, if it's in a basement where it's going to take them, 3 months to get through it all to find it, they probably won't. But if it's something they have access to, then people go out of their way for you. It's really amazing the things they'll do when people are doing genealogy research. I've found, at least.
Right. Well, thank you so much. You have been so generous with your time and your expertise. Again, I took a whole page of notes. I'm just so grateful for your time this evening, Reem. I don't want to end on a negative note at all, but you're just so full of really great information. So I want to ask you, like, a final question.
Okay.
What do you, in your experience, find as the biggest challenge for people who want to start doing Arab American research or Arab family history? What do you, based on your experience, what do you find is like the biggest challenge?
I find it's the language, because sometimes people have the resources. People have told me, I have these letters, I have this book, I have this, I have a person that I know knows this, but I can't speak to them, or I can't read it, or I can't, hopefully there's going to be some changes. I know there is people working on kind of AI reading, where you can scan and read Arabic like you do in English. This is
awesome.
Not just a written, but handwritten. Just like, I know most of you who did genealogy, does general genealogy, know when the 1950 census rolled out, that was the whole first test of this handwritten census AI program, right? And so, and it worked out pretty well. There were kinks here and there. So we're hoping in Arabic that will happen too, because right now, all like on Family Search, all of the Arabic documents they have are not indexed, because they don't have anybody, they're trying to, they are making an effort. They're trying to get people from other countries to index things, but it's a big job, right? And so if that system is developed, and we can do similar like we did with the 1950 census or other English documents that this is happening for, then hopefully we'll have more documents that can be indexed, that can be searchable for people who are only English speakers. But a lot of times you can, I'll tell you, universities are your friend. I have found when there's a language that I don't know and I need something translated, I have looked up a local university, found, put out something, and either whether it's a department in a language, or just, to somebody in that region of study, and there'll be students who, want to make a little bit of money, and then they'll translate stuff for you. And it's just, it's a great way of giving a student a job, and it helps you with your research. So that's something that I found, more than just sending it to maybe a professional translator who is going to charge you hundreds of dollars or even more to translate. A lot of times you can get a student to do that for you, and it's a win-win. It's something they're learning about, something you're learning about. So I think the language barrier is, and then we have Ottoman Turkish, which is like, a whole other thing, but it's similar to Arabic, at least, some of the things are able to, do through Arabic, but that's a whole other issue right there. But yeah, I would say the language barrier, but there are ways around it. And I really hope we do not do not use that as a way to not do your research. I mean, try it, try to do the research. If you get stuck, if you have a question, you can shoot me a question. There are people, like I said, through Family Search who are doing this research, at least on the Ottoman level. You know, they're very helpful. There's a lot of people out there that can be helpful, but you have to kind of move through it, and no, it's going to take time. I mean, again, like I said, we don't have Ottoman records for a lot of countries, or unless you know how to go to Turkey and get them, you know. But I'm just saying that they are coming. I mean, there are people who are working on getting those digitized. There are people who are working on getting access to them. You know, there's a lot of political considerations and all of this. You know, we have to be understanding and patient with all that. But at some point, they will come through. But it's not a roadblock. It's just something we have to work with. Right.
Well, Reem, thank you so much. You have been so informative and inspirational. It's neat to hear about all the new things that are coming, and about your encouraging sound research methodology and sound strategies.
Thank you.
I think you gave everyone a really a nice amount of really meaningful information. So thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. I just say thank you for all the work you guys do. I haven't made it in person out there, but I will at some point, because
you're always welcome.
Library is if not one of the key places we all want to go to do research. So
you're very kind, and you're always welcome. Those of us who joined us this evening, thank you for sharing your time with Reem and I, and we hope that you will tune in again at a future Zoom program. Again, thank you, Reem, for a great presentation, and to everyone, have a good evening.
You too. Bye.